Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Josh Vickers, and I am with the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence. This is our first webinar of 2019, and the title of today's webinar is entitled Elder Sexual Assault, a Collaborative Approach. We do have three subject matter experts and presenters today. Our first is Debbie Feinstein. She joined the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office as an Assistant State's Attorney in 2000. She is currently the Chief of the Special Victims Division, where she is responsible for supervising the prosecution of cases involving child physical and sexual abuse, domestic violence, elder abuse, human trafficking, sexual assault, and computer crimes against children. She is the chairperson of the Montgomery County Elder Vulnerable Adult Abuse Task Force and facilitates multidisciplinary coordination between agencies to address senior financial exploitation, physical abuse, and neglect. She does also chair the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team and the Choose Respect Healthy Team Dating Initiative, and serves on numerous other statewide local committees. Our next presenter is Jordan Satinsky. He is currently the Deputy Director of the Special Victims Investigation Division in the Montgomery County Police Department. He has been a law enforcement officer since 1999 and worked as a patrol officer, an investigator, a patrol supervisor, and an investigative supervisor. During his career, Lieutenant Satinsky has investigated property crimes, child sex and physical abuse, adult sex crimes, elder vulnerable adult abuse, domestic violence, and homicide. He did found the sex assault unit for the county police and was instrumental in integrating the police department in the local family justice center. He has also provided subject matter expertise to the National Institute of Justice, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and various other state and local agencies. And our final presenter of the day is Mr. Mario Warzussen. He has worked with the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, Aging and Disability Services for 30 years. His experience includes serving as a clinical case manager in adult protective services, public guardianship, and care management for 15 years. Additionally, he has served as a supervisor and administrator of adult services and APS. His current duties include community outreach, program development, and partnering with key members of the community. He has been a member and leader of the Montgomery County Elder Vulnerable Adult Abuse Task Force since 2011, as well as a chair and co-chair of the nationally recognized local World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. His awards include the NACO Team Awards for Disaster Shelter Response and Mobile Integrated Healthcare with EMS FRS, and several other county and nonprofit awards for public and community service. Our quick disclaimer for the FTCOE, the opinions, findings, and conclusions or recommendations expressed in this presentation are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. Any products and manufacturers discussed are presented for informational purposes only and do not constitute product approval or endorsement by the U.S. Department of Justice. And now, without further ado, now that we've gotten the disclaimer out of the way, I would like to hand things over to our first presenter, Ms. Debbie Feinstein.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Jordan Satinsky from the Montgomery County Police Department, and Debbie Feinstein's here as well from the prosecutor's office.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And Mario Warzussen from Adult Protective Services.
Good afternoon.
So today, well, first, let me thank everyone for coming and taking your time out of your day to join us. I see you're from all over the country, and I even see someone from Spain. That's awesome. This is a topic that is rarely discussed, and there's not a lot of information out there about it. And we're hoping after today, you'll learn some of the things that we learned through our last 5 years of putting this project together and working together. Traditionally, elder sex assault investigations were done in silos. So the police had their response, APS had their response, meaning Adult Protective Services, and then the prosecutors would take over. So initially, patrol responded to the scene. They would gather their information. They would contact the investigators, who may or may not come out depending on what was going on. And an investigation would be conducted with just the investigators. And then the prosecutor would get the case and decide whether or not it would go to court or not. At that time, or at some point during the transition to the prosecutors, Adult Protective Services would get notified and start their own investigation, at which time our victims would end up getting re-interviewed several times, which is all sorts of wrong as far as re-victimizing our victims, especially in this specialized society. And what was missing? Missing from these cases? We didn't talk. We didn't get together. We didn't have specialized training in this area. Adult Protective Services was far into the police department, and as Mario will probably attest, the police department was far into Adult Protective Services. We didn't utilize the sexual assault forensic group as much as we should have. We assumed that Adult Protective Services, as the police, handled victim advocacy for our victims. We didn't have those timely notifications from either Adult Protective Services to the police or the police to Adult Protective Services. Root case review was not conducted. Usually what ended up occurring is if there was a failure, we ended up having more or less a finger-pointing session and not so much a learning session. So we needed to figure out a way to change this, and we needed to figure out a way to move things forward. And that started here in Montgomery County, Maryland in 2013 when the police department moved into the Family Justice Center in our county seat of Rockville, where we then integrated with not only the prosecutor's office, but victim advocates, as well as the Montgomery County Sheriff's, and eventually Adult Protective Services. So let's look at some of the recommendations and who's involved in elder vulnerable adult sexual assault investigations.
So who's involved? Well, the police department. They conduct the criminal investigation. State attorney's office prepares and presents the criminal case for trial. Adult Protective Services, we have highly trained, licensed social workers who are responsible for assessing and assisting in the elder vulnerable adult abuse cases, and ombudsmen who serve as the voice of the victim. They work primarily in nursing homes and licensed assisted living facilities.
From the police angle, the police department started to train officers in elders and vulnerable sexual assault response. We utilized the victim disclosure as our primary keystone to beginning our case, as we would in any other sexual assault case. But we also had to train our officers to make sure they understood to keep more of a trauma-informed and open mind when interacting with this specialized population. We also had to make sure that our patrol officers did not go out and judge the case from the start, regardless of the population, but especially in the elder sexual assault response area, because these are cases that can be very misunderstood from the onset. And for those who are not trained in this area, they may accidentally jeopardize the victim staying involved in this case based on their verbal or nonverbal body language. So we taught our officers to keep an open mind and just capture the information. Do not judge. They were told to make sure they notify investigators as soon as possible so we could move forward and deploy in a manner fit for this investigation. And what we found was, in the first year of doing this, we increased our investigations in this area well over 100%. I mean, we went from doing about overall 100 cases a year. The first year before we took over, they did 16 cases total of elder vulnerable adult abuse, and of those, none were captured as sexual assault. The following year, we did well over 130, and there were several that were elder sexual assault that were identified because we were able to retrain our patrol officers and our investigators to keep an open mind and conduct those trauma-informed on-site interviews. Now, when we get one of these cases, Adult Protective Services, the ombudsman, are notified as soon as possible, and they are brought in with the investigation as soon as possible for several reasons. One, it increases collaboration. Two, it lessens the possibility of re-victimizing our victim through multiple victim interviews. Three, the APS agent has a higher standard of training when it comes to these cases and knows certain questions to have our investigators ask. My investigators, they're meant to root out what occurred, and they may not have all the technical experience of an APS agent who's been doing this for 20 years and can provide them with potential questions and even medical lingo to assist in driving the initial victim interview. Prosecutors are also notified fairly quickly of these investigations once they're confirmed, and they are brought in to not only discuss, but review and provide information. And our sexual assault nursing examining group here located in our county, very involved in this and provides us with up-to-date information about the examinations they conduct and in order for us to further our investigation.
When the case comes to the state's attorney's office, that's what we call our district attorney or prosecutor's office here in our jurisdiction in Montgomery County, Maryland. We receive a sexual assault investigation notice one of several different ways. It may come in through the police, it may come in through Adult Protective Services, or it may come in because the victim walks into our Family Justice Center to make a report, or we may get directly notified by a victim calling the state's attorney's office. What happens, and this is the most important part, is we have a specialized unit within the state's attorney's office to address these cases and to work hand in glove with the police department and with Adult Protective Services investigators. We have a director of our unit here. We're called the Crimes Against Seniors and Vulnerable Adults Unit, and we work together to make sure that we can be helping with legal advice on search warrants, talking about evidence that should be collected and preserved, all with an eye towards an evidence-based prosecution at the end of this, which we'll talk about a little later in the presentation. By getting involved early, we also have the opportunity to witness the interviews that the police conduct in real time. We have the ability, and I hope some of you all have this as well in your jurisdictions, to actually observe the interviews as they are happening through closed caption, essentially. We can sit in another room. Oftentimes, investigators either wear a headset or available literally through text message, so we can be offering thoughts and ideas during the course of the interview. Try not to interrupt too much. Then oftentimes the investigators actually step out kind of at different points to consult with us so that we can have that conversation and work together using our collective knowledge. As Jordan described, what we found here in our jurisdiction is that by bringing together all of our specialties, as opposed to acting in silos, we can really bring all of our unique experiences. So, for example, if I have 20 years of experience, Jordan has 20 years of experience, and Mario has 20 years of experience, collectively, obviously, we have 60 years of experience, and those experiences are different because of the perspectives that we each come from. Once the interviews and interrogations are completed, we also have the opportunity to review all of the evidence that is collected and have those conversations. Should there be another search warrant that's executed? Should we be submitting DNA for analysis? What else might we think about and collect? Again, all from our different perspectives. And then at the end of the day, we collaborate together to talk about what counts should we charge, what might we prosecute. But even more important than that, our role extends beyond the prosecution. We have conversations about safety planning. What are the next steps going to be for our victim? How are we going to keep them safe? How are they going to feel safe? And make all of those decisions, again, as a collective and a conversation. And Mario is going to share a little bit more about that perspective.
Yes, in the spirit of collaboration, Adult Protective Services, right at intake on a sex assault case, will be sharing that intake information with both the police and the state attorney's office. And through a memorandum of understanding, we march forward in that respect. When a social worker, we have master level licensed social workers that perform the investigations. And when they go out, they're going to do a biopsychosocial assessment of that situation in investigative mode. But what we're doing differently now is we're contacting our police partners right at the start so that we can team immediately so as to maximize proper evidence collection, to not re-traumatize our victims with multiple interviews, but to streamline that process and coordinate our investigation. We're really seeking to minimize duplication of effort and maximizing our assessment. Social workers are going to go out and build and maintain rapport. They're going to document both with camera and also their interviews and provide the information that they see in terms of the client's mental status, which is important in terms of the ability to consent or not, medical and behavioral situation, and who's involved, which caregivers, which family and friends are a part of that client's life. It's important to remember that even if we have a cognitively impaired client, perhaps early stage dementia, that their what we call excitable utterances, that which they say, could in fact indicate a problem or an assault. And so we write that down. We take it seriously, and we share that with our partners, our police partners, and state attorneys. And for instance, a client might say, well, my caregiver touched me in a place that I'm embarrassed about. So we would explore that with the client. Where did they touch you? How did that make you feel? What did they do? Establishing rapport, making that client feel safe, assuring safety, and in fact, developing a safety plan so that they're not put in a similar situation in the future. Additionally, we'll contact our victim assistance program to provide further assistance for that client through this process. It's a very difficult and traumatizing situation. We're aware of that. We want to be there for the client, but we also want justice served and hold perpetrators accountable.
So as Debbie discussed, one of the things that is very high on our minds is obviously evidence in these cases, because unfortunately this specialized population is also considered the perfect victim, because many people, and I'm not saying the police or the other folks in this room, they don't believe them, fortunately, for a myriad of reasons. Most of it has to do with not understanding these cases and this casework, but it's important that we are able to show a jury, if it goes that route, and through our investigation, the evidence that supports what the victim has informed us about this case. And later on in this discussion, going to go over a couple of case examples where evidence did help prove these cases, especially with one victim who was not really able to communicate with us too much. So the police, when they respond to the scene after the patrol officer confirms the crime and contacts our domestic violence elder abuse unit, the investigator gets dispatched out. And they're going to do, with the APS investigator, they're going to do a few things right away. First of all, they're going to interview the police officer that was there, as well as the reporting party, if it was not our victim. If they can communicate with the victim, because as we know, sometimes that does not occur, we will go straight into looking for evidence. So, especially with our elder population, their skin, because of the medications they take, or just based on their age, or a combination of both, they may bruise or tear more easily. So you may have some of that skin sloughage or ripping because of a violent attack. They may have drugs, like I said, that impact this. In many cases, our elder victims may not be able to actually consent to sexual intercourse. They may not be of sound mind because of, let's say, dementia, or even have the physical capacity to consent, and the reasonable person would understand that, which we can use in court. Many times we find, unfortunately, in these cases that the suspect is a staff member or a caregiver. Usually if it's an institutional setting, we find that it's a caregiver that works in an institutional setting or a contract worker that has completed this act. If it's a caregiver in a smaller home, usually, again, we find that sometimes these people prey not only on that home, but on victims in that home, but many other places as well. So we try to make sure that once we find a staff member or a caregiver that we have evidence to put forth that shows that this has happened, that we go back and look at all their other places of employment to see if they have other allegations. Sure enough, most of the time, they do. And did that suspect have the opportunity to commit this offense? Many times, our caregivers go into these rooms with our elderly victims, and it's just them. They're there to bathe them, they're there to change them, they're there to provide medications, and there's many, many opportunities for these caregivers to do something to these victims, unfortunately. And there's not a lot of good records kept on who went in, who went out, because sometimes a caregiver may wander into a room, maybe they do attack the victim and wander out, but nobody ever saw them because they didn't log in to the room as far as taking care of the patient at that time. There are some cases where, believe it or not, family members are involved in this. And we'll discuss one of these cases later in an elderly domestic situation. And there was the victim or the suspect in this case overwhelmed by the family member. It's very difficult to take care of an elder and or a vulnerable adult as they increase in age and show more areas of deficiency in both their mind and their body. And sometimes family members can act out, those caregivers can act out and end up doing something to the victim, which they will eventually discuss with us in an interview room. We'll also talk to other family members, anyone who may have seen this victim, recently or before, and get a pattern, to establish a pattern where this main caregiver may have been abusing physically or sexually this individual. When it comes to the private residence of the group home, like I said earlier, we'll talk about that history with not only the group home, but the potential suspect and their willingness to provide information. Group homes traditionally have not been very upfront with providing us with information, and we have to sometimes utilize the criminal justice system outside of the subpoena in order to get information, such as search warrants, where we actually come on the scene and take pretty much everything in order to help us prove our case. Commercial nursing homes, those similar to assisted living facilities, have corporate entities, and some of them are on the stock market, and they are very much profit-driven, which is fine, but it means they have lots of layers of bureaucracy. This is one area where we definitely would engage our prosecutor very, very early on to get assistance in how to get things like medical records, employment records. Because like I said earlier, we may have to go the route of a search warrant in order to get these records. But sometimes your prosecutor, when they're brought on board early, they can make a good call to the in-house counsel, and next thing you know, our medical records or employment records with the use of a subpoena suddenly appear. APS keeps their own investigative file, and through MOUs, we are allowed to look through that. And that information really does help us when it comes to charging, prosecuting these cases, because they capture information that our police detectives may not. And not because our police detectives missed it, but because our police detectives didn't have that same level of medical or social work training to know to capture it. As we go through our training with APS, which we do every year, we are learning more and more. But we're still kind of young in this. This has only been 5 years for the police department, so we do have some time to go forward. But thankfully, we're still learning and we're still moving forward.
So when an APS gets a case right at intake, one of our first strategies is to actually review our database to see if there's any history on that patient or any of the family members or caregivers. So we have that information going into the investigation. Additionally, we're going to do a judiciary case search for the state of Maryland, looking for past criminal history on that suspect or other family members, so that we're aware and we can make our partners aware going into the investigation. Also, throughout that investigation, in terms of evidence collection, Adult Protective Services in the state of Maryland, by law, has the ability to access medical records, financial records, and we do, that we can build a case as we try to determine if something has occurred or not. Of course, we talked about the safety planning element. That's starting as soon as the investigator arrives at the home. We want to ensure the safety of that victim and also of our investigators or social workers. Hence, we do partner with police, especially when we know that there's been physical harm or potential physical harm in a situation. So we invite our police partners. Of course, I've mentioned before also that it's very important to have ongoing support, and in our county we work closely with our Victims Assistance Sexual Assault Program, and they provide both professional and volunteer support, crisis counseling, ongoing counseling, support groups, support if there's medical care, in addition to our social work case managers, and even court companions, which we certainly take advantage of. And we also work closely with our nonprofit partners. Elder Safe would be one of those partners, which provides a safe housing and trauma-informed care, which we'll talk a little bit more about in one of our case examples.
So one of the things that's particularly important with respect to senior or vulnerable adult victims is how do we memorialize the evidence that's related to the case, knowing that it's possible that the victim could either, while they may not lack capacity at the time, they may lack capacity by the time the trial comes, they may be deceased. As many of you probably are aware, there are pretty high correlations between death and individuals learning that they've been victimized in an elder abuse situation. That applies not only to sexual assault, but to all sorts of elder abuse and financial exploitation. So our goal really is to prepare the case as if the victim would be unable to participate in the ultimate prosecution, meaning that they would be unable to testify. This is a strategy that we also use for domestic violence cases, and we've adopted it for our elder abuse cases as well. And in domestic violence cases, a lot of times we have victims that decide that they don't want to participate for a number of reasons. In elder abuse cases, the same, particularly when it's a family member or a trusted caregiver that is the perpetrator. They may have thoughts that they may not want to testify against that person. They may feel guilty. They may feel ashamed. They may financially rely on the perpetrator. So there are a lot of reasons that may cause a victim of elder sexual assault not to want to testify. And the largest one of those is, frankly, fear. So what do? Where possible, we want to make sure that the victim, if they're able, gives audio and or video recorded statements. And if that's not possible, then we want to make sure that they give written statements that are then adopted by them, meaning that they're signed or adopted in some other way. We're fortunate in Montgomery County to have body-worn cameras worn by all of our patrol officers in Montgomery County, so that when they respond to a scene, they're able to capture what's happening in that moment of time, live. So that's incredibly helpful information. Another piece of information that's very helpful, go back one slide. Another piece of information that's very helpful is also to make sure that we're taking photographs of the victim. And when I say photographs, we want head-to-toe photographs of the victim in these sorts of crimes, back and front, behind their ears, on top of their head, pulling their hair aside if we know that there are injuries. Some of the injuries that we see that aren't always photographs, for example, are injuries on the back of a victim's neck that are consistent with strangulation that we often see happens at the same time as the sexual assault, or it's part and parcel of the sexual assault. And that's not a place that people always know to take photographs. Same with behind the ears. And as we discussed and describe our collaborative approach also includes our sexual assault nursing examiners who are forensic nurses that are trained to take these kind of photographs and to collect physical evidence literally from the bodies of our victims. And so we want to make sure that those photographs are carefully taken. We also want to make sure that relevant evidence is collected, whether it's bedding, whether it's clothing, weapons. Sometimes in a sexual assault, we may have someone banged up against a wall or furniture broken. There may be a dent in the wall. There may be carpet where we have evidence that, for example, that there was ejaculate on the carpet. So we may want a slice of the carpet cut out. But these are all conversations that we're having ongoing and the things that we're thinking about. Again, so that we can make sure that even if the victim is not available for the trial, we have everything else preserved. We also want to make sure that the area is canvassed for additional witnesses. Is there anyone else that heard anything, saw anything, and that sort of thing? Because we want to make sure that we're capturing anything that might be an excited utterance, anything that might be a prior consistent statement or a contemporaneous statement. For example, someone screaming, yelling for help, that sort of thing, particularly when people live in multifamily dwellings or apartments. Another thing that we want to do is gather historical and contemporary information, 911 calls. We subpoena medical records. And it may be that we want to look not only at the medical records related to this offense, but we may want to look at prior medical records. For example, if it's a family member that's committing the sexual assault, we want to look and see what the patient's gynecological history is or medical history. Is there other evidence out there of bruises that don't appear in the right place? An irregular pelvic examination, for example. A history of urinary tract infections that's not consistent, there's no reason for it, that could be consistent with sexual assault, for example. Where relevant, we want to look for electronic evidence, meaning does the suspect or the victim, if we have a victim that has capacity, utilize social media? Are they texting? Are they using iMessage? Are they Googling things? What are they looking at in the days leading up to and the day of and the days after? I've had evidence that's come in through text messages where a suspect made threats following the assault to harm the victim, and that came in the days after. And we were able to recover that information by asking the companies, of the phone companies, to freeze and to preserve the text message exchanges, and then we were able to capture those through a search warrant. Where possible, we may want to ask the police and work with the police on phone sting, for example. So, for example, if it's a family member, you may want to use a non-offending family member to call the offender and to ask questions. Why did you do this to mom? Mom is in so much pain. Please tell me what happened so that we can help her. However, we want to try to gather that information. The last thing that I would say, and this is kind of a little bit beyond memorializing evidence, but is one other important piece to the evidence-based prosecution puzzle, which is we may want to talk with our partners about utilizing expert testimony. For example, we may have someone from Adult Protective Services testify as an expert about capacity. We may have one of the sexual assault nursing examiners testify as to their expert opinion about the nature of the injuries. Or, in some cases, there may not be any injury. And there's a whole line of articles and information about normal is normal. Someone that is sexually assaulted may not actually have any visible signs of injury, particularly if they've been sexually active in the past. So we may want an expert to talk about that. We may want an expert to talk about common characteristics of a victim of sexual assault. For example, a victim that may recant, a victim that may not disclose their sexual assault at the time that it happened. They may delay their disclosure. There's many different examples. There are counterintuitive behaviors that sexual assault victims sometimes experience or exhibit. And those are things, again, that are well documented in the psychological history and in medical history, and those are things that we may be able to provide an expert on. So those are just some of the thoughts that we have, again, in our collaboration with our partners, that we do our best to build our cases in the strongest way possible and prepare them for an evidence-based prosecution.
So one of the other things I want to discuss from what Debbie just talked about was the sex assault nursing examiner. And unfortunately, just because of the way the webinar is set up, having 4 people or even 5 people doing this would have been a little difficult. But the SANE nurses are incredible, and they capture information that is totally unique and needed for these types of investigations. It's one thing for my detective and an APS agent to respond into one of these cases, confirm that a crime occurred, and then bring them to the hospital. We basically get the basics at this point as to what occurred. But when that victim goes in with the sexual assault nursing examiner and they look at that person as a victim and they give them that, or patient, excuse me, and give them that examination, they have a different way to get information to make the victim feel comfortable and get information that actually corroborates what's going on. And we can use that in our criminal prosecution. That, and not only that, they can document bruising that we couldn't see on the scene, evidence of sexual trauma. Let's say you have an 80-year-old victim who does not regularly engage in sexual intercourse. These SANE nurses will be able to show you that, yeah, something happened here. There was sexual intercourse, and that's another leg to helping us investigate our case. So I wanted to make sure we discussed the SANE nurses, got it out there, that they are extremely important. And here in Montgomery County, our head SANE nurse is very involved in this process. She has taken a big liking to these types of cases and is working very, very hard on each one as they come in order to help us investigate and prosecute these cases and train her staff in that world as well. So as we move through the presentation, we're now going to talk about some of the things that we did here in Montgomery County over the time that we put into place as best practices in actual cases. And this is not meant to say that anyone did anything right, like wonderful, everything that somebody did terrible. This is really meant for, this is what we encountered at the time, and this is how we move forward with this case. So there are going to be 2 cases we discuss. One is a elder vulnerable adult who lived alone in a home who was sexually assaulted by a stranger, and the second is a domestic-related sexual assault where a victim was sexually assaulted by her husband. And we'll go through the differences between each case and how the police department, Adult Protective Services, and the prosecutor responded to each. So in the first case, this is the stranger case I just discussed. This is a 63-year-old female who lived alone in a first-floor apartment in our main city of Rockville. It's a garden-style apartment area with several hundred units. She had intellectual disabilities and some physical limitations. She was checked on daily by a myriad of county, state caregivers who assisted her with her medication and her daily needs. and making sure that she didn't need to be hospitalized or that everything was okay. This incident occurred early in the Monday morning during the work week. It was about 4 a.m. when our police officers got the call. According to the patrol officers who contacted my detectives, the victim said a man came through the window and sexually assaulted. And that's pretty much all they got. They didn't get anything else. At the time when the officers responded, they were unsure if this actually occurred. It's not that they didn't believe the victim, it just didn't make sense to them. To them, this woman was saying, well, I got sexually assaulted, and then her next words were, I don't want to go to the hospital, I don't want to do anything. So to them, they were like, I don't know what to do and how to get her the assistance she needs. At the time, our unit was relatively new and coming online, and they contacted us. One of my investigators at the time went out, assessed the scene, and eventually contacted me, and at the time I was the sergeant of the unit. I responded out as well. And we noticed, after doing a walk around of the building, that on her first floor apartment in the back, there was a utility room that from first look, it looks like a second entrance to her place. In that door, we found a paperclip where it looked like somebody was trying to get in, or jimmying a lock, as someone would say. Well, the window that the victim said the suspect came through was directly to the left of that. So we had our forensic services, or some of you know as CSI, come through and do a sweep of the apartment, and we found fingerprints on the inside of the window. We also found a towel which the victim stated had DNA or potential DNA from the suspect on it. But we weren't sure at this point. We did contact Adult Protective Services upon arriving because we only knew her to be living alone. We didn't know at the time that she had all these county services. Thankfully, because of our relationship with Adult Protective Services, they were able to help us coordinate all of the agencies involved in this woman's care. And I have said this to Mario in the past, had it not been for their assistance and their willingness to help us on this case, we probably would be still sitting there trying to figure out who to call. This relationship we built over the years really did help us navigate and get the best services to this victim as soon as possible. So we have this towel, we have these fingerprints. The fingerprints go into the system, and the fingerprints hit relatively quickly, which meaning they came back with a result from a suspect who actually lived in the area. But the address we had at the time was an old address. After doing some more physical work as far as looking at the suspect, we found out he actually lived basically across the street from this woman in another apartment with his girlfriend at the time. We interviewed him. He denied the incident. He said he had nothing to do with it. When the investigators asked him, well, why would your fingerprints ever be inside of her apartment? He vehemently denied it. They asked about his DNA being in the apartment. He vehemently denied it. And when all the information was finally provided and he went to trial, he was sentenced to life in prison for his actions. And the woman got all the medical treatment that she was willing to get at the time, and her caregivers still from the various county and state agencies still assist her to this day.
Yes, in terms of Adult Protective Services, when our intake unit received the call, this woman was living in a group home for folks with behavioral health, mental health challenges, and that's actually not part of our jurisdiction unless we're requested to go in. However, we were able to identify that particular program, who to contact, police taking the lead on this as it was a criminal rape situation, as well as the support services. So that's how we engage in this particular case.
With respect to the state's attorney's office, we were the beneficiaries of a lot of the work that was done by our partner agencies, and also worked closely with them as we made decisions about evidence and continued to have conversations regarding, what DNA to test, fingerprints, search warrants to be issued, and that sort of thing. And we were collaborating the whole time.
And from this case, a couple things happened. One of the major things was, as I initially said, the responding patrol officers were really unsure how to attack this case and what to do. They didn't understand it. They didn't understand why this woman was not willing to go to the hospital. And as we wound through this case, the 3 or 4 officers that responded initially, they changed their tune quite a bit and were actually much more educated about how these cases work and gave that information out to other folks in their area where they work. And as a matter of fact, one of those officers is now a sergeant in charge of my child abuse unit. So that comes from this case, from him learning about these cases and moving forward. In the next case, we're going to discuss an elder sex assault that was domestic related. So this is a husband and wife that live together in a single family home. And patrol responds to initiate a sexual assault investigation. This case happened several years after the first one we just discussed. The victim's son had contacted 911 to report that his mother had been sexually assaulted by his father. And the only thing we knew at the time was the husband utilized some sort of an object to perform this sex act. Now, the victim had numerous ailments. She had dementia, several physical ailments, and this all stems from her dementia, where she disclosed to her husband that she had cheated on him 25 years earlier with one of his friends, and that started this whole thing. The victim presented to my detectives when they responded with both facial and chest bruising consistent with being in a physical altercation. Adult Protective Services and our sex assault investigators responded together and conducted this joint investigation. We went to the home, and it was a well-kept home. We executed a search warrant there after talking to the suspect because he was on scene when patrol arrived. And we discovered the item that was utilized in this case and took that into custody, as well as took photographs of the area. This case was not easy because we had a son who was basically putting his father in prison, and a woman who couldn't really tell us everything that occurred except for in broken bits and pieces. APS investigators were the keystone to making this work by talking to this victim and understanding the phrases and terms to use in order to get our victim to discuss what happened to her as best she could. And then we utilized the evidence that we found to corroborate her story, as well as the statements that were taken from the son, who was the first generation disclosure, meaning that the mom disclosed to him and then he talked to us about it. It was not an easy case. It weighed on a lot of our investigators because they all have elderly folks in their family. This was not easy for everyone, but in the end, the husband ended up pleading guilty to abuse of a vulnerable adult and was sentenced to 10 years with 5 years supervised probation. And again, this was a couple years after the first case, and we really started to hone our skill set as far as how we interact with the prosecutors, how we interact with APS, and it really did bring forth a lot of great collaboration and a lot of things that, had it not been for these relationships and the things we learned from each other, we would not have been able to make this case work.
Sure. So Adult Protective Services was contacted after the police went out to do their initial investigation. The client, 76 at the time, was hospitalized. So our investigator went out with the police and detective and did their initial interview. She was sleepy and lethargic at that point, so we could only go so far. And our investigator actually went back a second time, where she administered some mental status exams, a BIMS exam, brief interview for mental status, and documented there was significant cognitive situation, dementia already noted. Our investigator also reviewed the medical situation of that client. As noted by Jordan, she certainly had a number of medical issues, including a post-stroke situation, heart issues, malnutrition, always worth noting, and makes you wonder about the care in the home. Also, an extensive history was done on that victim or client, and we noted that she had been pulled out of rehab facilities by her husband several times, and then it became obvious, I think, to the investigator that the care in that home was suspect. And in terms of the sexual assault, during the second visit, she was actually able to verbalize that her husband, after discussion about a possible interaction with someone back in the 60s, actually she said, "I was just trying to get him off my back," and literally he jumped on her back, strangled her, altercation ensued, and the social worker observed and documented that there was bruising on her face, her chest, her right arm, her right leg. Also working with the medical staff there, there were tears in her anal area and so forth, and this was presented to our police partners as evidence of that assault. And she clearly stated that her husband got mad at her, he couldn't fend him off, and he basically attacked her, and then the assault occurred sexually.
The only thing that I would add to this case and also sort of generally is to note that in addition to the things that we've described, and Mario referenced this earlier, we have something called the Elder Vulnerable Adult Abuse Task Force here in Montgomery County, and I don't think we've referenced that specifically. So we talk about the collaboration that we have on a daily basis. Once a month or more often if necessary, we actually gather all of our partners together face-to-face in a room. So that includes not only state's attorney, APS, police, but it also includes ombudsman, it includes some medical professionals. Where relevant, it includes our Elder Safe, which is a location where victims can get safe shelter. So we bring everyone together face-to-face to discuss these cases as they're in progress in a confidential way, so that we can all share best practices, best ways to address things. So for example, if a victim is receiving services or is in therapy and may have some triggers or some other things that may come up, we can share that information confidentially and collaboratively so that we as the prosecutors will be ready to handle the situation in the best way possible for that victim.
The Elder Vulnerable Adult Abuse Task Force that Debbie just mentioned is a really amazing group of folks that, had it not been for these groups and getting together and talking about where we all come from different sides, we wouldn't have all learned about how we look at these cases. Many times people look at each case while they're all looking at it for the victim's sake. They all look at it from different angles, from their silos, and having this group all come together to be able to discuss those kind of things really helped educate my cops and myself about what APS is looking at, what the ombudsman is looking at, what the prosecutor is looking at, things we didn't have before. So those were very, very important, and that group is important. And having that level of confidentiality that Debbie discussed is also important, because the ability to speak your mind in one of these meetings is paramount to making it work. And if there's ever a time when anyone thinks that it's going to get out of that room while you're discussing the best avenue for a case, a lot of people won't talk. They won't raise their hand. They won't offer up opinions. So it's important to have that confidentiality standard in your MOU if you have something like this.
And we're able to, for anyone that's interested, we are happy to share a copy of our Memorandum of Understanding, our confidentiality agreement, and other things that might be supportive to your jurisdictions if you choose, or if you're already doing a collaborative setup, then we're happy to share. We'd love to see what you have going on. We're always looking to collaborate with other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah, if you guys have something out there that works better for you from what we're talking about here, please send it to us. We'd love to learn from anybody. We're big into that, and we'll incorporate anything you all have. As we wind this webinar down, and we'll take questions in a few minutes, obviously we've hit on this point several times, but I want to make sure we hit it one more time. The integration is important. All working together in the same office really changed, and I will tell you my mindset in a lot of ways. When I was a young detective, if I looked back 15 years ago at my investigative self then and said, oh, I'll be sitting next to a prosecutor and a bunch of victim advocates, sheriffs, I would have said you were crazy. Never would have happened. But it did. And I'm so glad it did, because I learned so much about how to do my job in a much more positive fashion for my victims and for my cases. And I really think, and I'd let Debbie and Mario discuss this too, that they learned a lot from us, where they could not, at one point they would look and say, well, the cops are over 2-3 miles away, we'll just call them or email them. Now they could walk into our office and they see how we work these cases. They come in at 9 o'clock and see that sometimes my investigators were out since 9 o'clock the night before, and are dragging because they haven't slept in a day and a half working on some of these things. So it was important things that they noticed and saw. Another thing we do, which was not discussed to this point, is how we share information. Every morning, the domestic violence elder abuse sergeant reviews all of the incoming cases and makes case assignments. These case assignments are made electronically and shared via PDF to not only the investigators, but to our various victim advocates in the county, our system-based victim advocates, not the community-based victim advocates, just because of the way our MOUs are written, and our prosecutor's office and our sheriffs. Now, the reason why that happens. We first started doing this, we would have elder cases, whether they be sexual, physical, any of those, where our investigators would get the case, and next thing you know, we'd meet up with the family, start to do our investigation with Adult Protective Services, only to learn that 3 or 4 different victim advocacy groups from inside Montgomery County had contacted the victim to ask them if they needed services. So it was a little overwhelming for the victim. And then we showed up. So that kind of pares that down to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Also, it advises the prosecutor to make sure that they know this case is potentially coming to them. And sometimes, and Debbie will attest, we will have cases which maybe will not meet the criminal bar, or the victim decides they don't want to go forward, but several months after the case comes out, Debbie may send me a note saying, hey, whatever happened in this case? Because she knows about it. And it came in as something terrible, but in the end, maybe it didn't turn out to be what it was, or the victim decided they didn't want to go forward. In Mario's case, as far as making sure he gets the cases, there are some cases which only come through the police department for these, especially on the sex assault side. So we'll make sure that we get that to them through that email sharing. That also goes to them. And conversely, they send us, meaning Adult Protective Services, all of their intakes every day. Now, one of the things I learned fairly quickly is that Adult Protective Services does a whole lot of financial cases, which is not something my group does. But we do physical sexual neglect for elder and vulnerable adults, and we were able to capture other sexual assault cases that were coming through them and not through us, and be able to work with Adult Protective Services to move these cases forward and get them into court.
Yeah, in terms of the multidisciplinary approach, one thing I want to point out too is the training that's involved and the opportunity to work together. Our social workers and therapists had the benefit of actually doing safety training at the police academy for 3 sessions in October, which was outstanding, from situational awareness to how to do some basic self-defense if someone actually grabs you, and then just really being steeped in the atmosphere that our police partners work in so that we can better understand them and their approach, and hopefully vice versa with Adult Protective Services. Also, we had a terrific training with our Office of State Attorneys and prosecutors and county attorneys in terms of how APS presents in court or testifies, and we literally went into a courtroom and practiced and cross-examined, and that experience was invaluable and also gives our staff a better appreciation of evidence collection. We also did some work on documentation, both paper, electronic, and also visual pictures and so forth, cameras, and having this partnership ability to come together on a regular basis, monthly basis, or sooner as needed is terrific, and having everyone on speed dial really goes a long way, and I think protecting and assisting our clients, vulnerable clients, when we are called.
So, pardon me. One of the other areas we should also discuss are these case reviews, as we talked about in ETAP with the Elder Vulnerable Adult Task Force. These case reviews are not closed cases. These are live cases. These aren't reviews of cases that were already finished. These are cases that are currently occurring. And it's important to note that because many agencies do closed case reviews, which is awesome because you can learn from so much from that. But these live case reviews are unbelievable. And the things you can learn and the actions you can take based on the collaboration you're having right then and there is something you can't ever get from anything else.
So just to give you an example, we had a case review 2 weeks ago where we met around the table, and it was a case that had just come in. And we gathered actually everyone together within 48 hours notice and had literally, again, everyone face-to-face around the table. Well, it turned out we learned about some critical APS history and some interviews that had been conducted by some of the members of the APS team in the past that were critical to help us understand and help the investigators understand what had happened in the current situation. That's information that we wouldn't necessarily have if we didn't have these confidentiality agreements and MOU. Many of you are probably familiar with HIPAA, and in our state with the different COMAR regulations that govern the ability to share information in a multidisciplinary format. And again, we've been able to create this carve-out, this multidisciplinary process where we're able to share this information, enhance our investigation, and get access to material that we may not otherwise have access to in a timely fashion that may otherwise require subpoenas or other things that would take a lot of time. And by gathering together within 48 hours of an offense being committed or an alleged offense being committed, we have that information right away, and then it can inform us going forward. So I can tell you that it's really of critical importance. And since we've incorporated this process over the last 6 years, it's really made an incredible difference to our ability to successfully prosecute and hold offenders accountable for their criminal contact.
I'll tell you, when I first came here to the unit for domestic violence, elder abuse, when we started here, one of the things I noticed, as I said earlier, was that we were not doing a lot of elder vulnerable adult abuse investigations at all. We did like 15 or 16 the year before I got there, and then it shot up tremendously. I just basically took everything for a long time trying to figure out what we were doing and educating my troops. And eventually we had to start triaging. But from that, and that increase, the state attorney's office actually was able to create their unit, CASVA, Crimes Against Seniors and Vulnerable Adults, which we work hand in hand with every day. They also sit here at the Family Justice Center. And it is an amazing working relationship. It's great to work with them, and they get us a lot of information, and it really helps us out, especially with subpoenas, getting us histories and working with APS and coordinating on the back end as we work through our live investigations.
Yeah, and I will say that because we are aware of the needs of the police, of the state attorney's office, as the numbers grow, and they are growing, we've had a 24% increase in APS investigations in this fiscal year alone. I know that my partners are going to support a request for additional staff, as we do when they're looking for more officers, detectives, or prosecutors, and it helps us to meet the growing demand here in this county.
So the basic takeaway on elder sex abuse and investigations is really taking that time for the police agencies to educate your responding patrol officers and investigators, one, on just the facts aspect. I mean, I hate saying that, but really it is, keeping in mind that they just need to take down the information when they first get there and listen to their victims, jot down what it is, contact the investigators, be mindful of their nonverbal body language and the way they interact with the victim. These victims, especially in this population, have a tendency to not always want to talk to the police or answer direct questions for a myriad of reasons. It is important to keep an open mind and not get frustrated and move this case forward as best you can and get evidence as you can to move this forward, because a lot of your victims aren't going to be able to tell you anything. And many of the people that they disclose to are going to be the key to making this case move forward. The evidence you find on them or the evidence that's given to you from the sexual assault nursing examiner are key to moving this case into the trial, into the courtroom, and holding those accountable. Really figure out what works for you all and make it policy. Write it down. Put it someplace. We all have these great ideas, and we want to put them forth and make them work for our agencies, but nobody writes stuff down. If you don't write it down, it's not going to outlast you. So that would be one other thing that I take the time to make sure that you do. On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and taking an hour out of your day or so to listen to us talk about our experiences with elder sex assault investigations. I know from this point forward we have about a half hour or so to answer some questions. I do see a whole bunch, and I'll let Josh take over and move that to where it needs to go. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you all very much for your presentations. I'm going to go ahead and put up on the screen there. All of our presenters were kind enough to give out their contact phone numbers as well as emails. So during our Q&A, we will have that up so everyone can have the opportunity to take that down. Our first question came in from Kimberly. She's asking, is there an interest in other Maryland counties to replicate Montgomery County's collaborative effort to aid elderly sexual assault victims? And then Mary chimed in saying that they are attempting to replicate the awesome model that these folks have done down here in Washington, D.C. There is currently a bill before the D.C. Council to do so, and hopefully this can happen. She believes each jurisdiction needs this. Are you aware of any other Maryland counties that are replicating your effort?
So we actually have had several jurisdictions come and visit our task force to observe, including Washington, D.C., but also Frederick County and Howard County have come to visit. Baltimore County have come to visit. We invite representatives to come to our task force. We share with them all of our documents regarding our MOU, our confidentiality agreement, and Kelly Davis, who is our director of our Crimes Against Seniors and Vulnerable Adults program, makes herself available to kind of share how we're all set up here. So we are making ourselves available. I've also had the opportunity to speak at several statewide conferences about our model, and the three of us have also spoken at national conferences on our model as well. So I know that there are barriers in different counties, and that we've been very fortunate here that there has been political will from the leadership in all of our organizations, the police chief, the state's attorney, the county executive, the secretary of the Health and Human Services department in our county, and frankly, their political will helped move a lot of these things forward for us, and that doesn't always exist. So we've been incredibly fortunate, but I think building those relationships and doing that advocacy to people with the power to make those decisions, I think has been important. Our task force actually began in 1999, and there were some of the years that were really robust and some of the years that were not as robust. But it was really, again, as I described, in the last 6 or 7 years that there's been a revitalization of our process given the leadership in our county. And again, we are happy to share, happy to bring our information to others, and also happy to learn from all of you.
One of the things we found here was actually showing a need for these kind of cases and these specializations really did help push a lot of our agenda as far as building this. I mean, between Mario, Debbie, and I, we really wanted to see this work, and thankfully our department heads were in line with us, and we were able to show that need by working these cases and taking that time to really dig into this.
Yeah, actually just last week I shared with the program specialist for the state of Maryland's Office of Adult Services, our MOU, and Kelly, thank you for sharing the confidentiality agreement because there are other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland that do want to replicate this multidisciplinary approach. It makes a huge difference, and I'm glad that other jurisdictions are taking a look at that.
One of the things for those local or those who have the ability to pay for it, you're more than welcome to join us at our EVTAP meeting as an observer. If you just give us a heads up ahead of time and work with our program manager from the State Attorney's Office, Ms. Kelly Davis, she will help and facilitate that.
And to give you an idea of our collaboration, Kelly is sitting here with us in the conference room as we present this webinar as really the on-the-ground person dealing with this. And when I describe political will, again, in my office, we're fortunate that my boss, the elected state's attorney, John McCarthy, had the foresight to set up our specialty unit, knowing that crimes involving seniors and vulnerable adults often bridge sort of the traditional divisions that are set up within state's attorney's offices. So the way that we're set up is we address sexual assault, physical abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation all within one unit as a way to look at all of those pieces together.
Was there another question? Sorry.
Yep. So our next question is asking if it is recommended to use a sane nurse hospital. It seems a sane nurse would have better training to examine the victims, and an emergency room nurse might be less capable. What are your thoughts on that?
So again, this is Debbie. The answer is 100% yes. So when we've been referring to the medical examination, we're referring to our sexual assault nursing examiners, particularly for cases of sexual assault, but also for elder abuse in general. Although their title is SANE, their title is also FNE, Forensic Nurse Examiners. So they do all of the head-to-toe, whether it's a sexual assault, a physical assault, that sort of thing, and do the documentation that we've described. They also have trauma-informed methodology that they employ, which is critically important for our victims, and are plugged into our wraparound services here in the county. So the answer to that question is yes, absolutely. It's a sexual assault nursing program. And if you have sexual assault nurses in your county that want to connect with the head of our program, her name is Jessica Bowles, and we can connect you to her as well. She's also developed pretty specific documentation format for elder sexual abuse and elder abuse in general, so that it can be mindful of the safety concerns, mindful of the evidence gathering, mindful of the physical and mental health needs, and really to integrate it into taking care of the whole person. So that's been something that she's developed at her hospital, which has been very helpful to our cases, as well as all of the other documentation that we've described.
I do want to also add that in my department, Health and Human Services, our public health nurse, we have a supervisor who's forensically trained that comes to our monthly elder abuse task force meetings, and periodically we're able to tap or utilize a health department nurse on a joint investigation of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. We find that extremely helpful. And if we do require a SANE exam, we certainly take advantage of that with our partner that Debbie just spoke about.
The SANE nurse is really just a very important cog in this whole thing, because not only do they provide that great forensic review, but they also can provide the victim with any of the further potential sexually transmitted disease medication that could go forward that sometimes other groups can't provide. So they kind of round out our victim as far as taking care of our victim in these kinds of cases, getting them further needs. And like we said earlier, Ms. Bowles has really taken the time, our sexual assault nurse examiner, to develop this program and ensure that victims in this specialized population get all the medical needs, the medical attention they can get and are willing to take.
All right. Next question we have is from Tina. She's saying that she is very interested in the MOU and confidentiality agreement. They are starting to rebuild their SART. Is that something that she should contact you with directly, or is there a website that she could possibly reference?
She can contact me at my email address, and frankly, I'm going to connect her to Kelly Davis. They'll be able to provide her with the information. But yes, why don't you just contact me directly? We don't have these documents sort of publicly available on our website, but we do, and are happy to provide them to you directly.
Absolutely.
All right. Next question we have is a two-parter. Does the Elder Vulnerable Adult Abuse Task Force include representatives from the Maryland Medical Examiner's Office? And have you developed any best practices for cases where an elder death investigation resulted in a sexual assault case? Some medical examiner offices have developed elderly fatality review teams that could benefit from your work.
So that's a great question, and it's definitely, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, it's kind of on our bucket list, and we've begun to work towards that. I know that sounds like a bizarre thing to say, that an elder fatality review team is on our bucket list, as my colleagues here kind of laugh at me. But in all seriousness, we think that this is a really important piece of the work. And we actually, for the first time in January, began to bring the fatalities into the conversation at our monthly case review, and we'll present another one at our next meeting, and so on, depending on the cases that come up. Because as for any of you that participate on any fatality reviews, and I do in the domestic violence and in the child abuse context as well, there are so many lessons to be learned by looking into those cases, and looking deeply into those cases. Even if they don't result in a criminal prosecution, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. So Kelly has attended training, actually did a wonderful training in Virginia a couple of years ago, specifically on this topic, and there's lots of information available online about setting up an elder fatality review team, and we are setting that up within the context of our elder vulnerable adult abuse team here in Montgomery County. With respect to having the medical examiner join, our office is located about an hour from our medical examiner's office. Actually, for both of them, we have two, both in the District of Columbia and in Baltimore, where our victims go. So it would be an unusual circumstance to be able to bring them to our team meetings. That having been said, if they were a necessary piece of the puzzle, depending on what we were discussing that time, we certainly would endeavor to include them. We just kind of haven't gotten there yet. It is a best practice to include a medical examiner as a part of the fatality review conversation, and it's something that we're working towards. We are also a work in progress here.
Okay. Next question we have is asking for elderly sexual assault victim cases that reach the litigation stage. At what point is the case information subjected to Brady disclosure?
we are always subjected to Brady disclosure. We here in Montgomery County have an open file discovery process, and at least, the way that what my office handles it and the way that I direct the people that work for me, if you receive Brady information, you need to disclose it immediately. That's the way that we handle it. So there's no specific point. It's always an obligation, and our practice here is to disclose it as soon as we get it. As prosecutors, we're obligated to follow the facts and to uphold the truth, and if there's information that's unhelpful to our case, we always provide it immediately.
And our investigators, this is Jordan, our investigators, if they come across something that could be construed as a Brady issue, they will immediately bring it to the prosecutor in charge of the case and the court side of it in order to, discuss it with them and then bring whatever they need to forward. They know we're not hiding anything either. This is very much open, especially at this stage. I hope that answers your question.
And just to add, for anyone who's on the line that doesn't know what Brady disclosures are, that's exculpatory information, or information that would tend to prove the defendant or to suggest the defendant or suspect's innocence, versus inculpatory information, which is stuff that tends to support or prove guilt. There's federal case law, local case law that requires prosecutors to turn that information over, and the disclosure requirements are different in different jurisdictions. But in Maryland, under our rules, we have an ongoing obligation to provide discovery, and certainly in my office, we raise our priority and our goal of getting that type of material out as soon as possible.
All right. While we wait on any last-minute questions to come in, I just want to make sure the audience is aware that we will be providing a PDF version of today's slide deck. That way you will have our presenters' contact information as well as all the slides that were presented today. We are also recording this webinar, and we will be converting it into our archival version over the next few days. We will send out emails once that is ready. That way you can refer back to this presentation at any time, as well as pass along to any colleagues that you feel might benefit from today's talk. While we are waiting on any last-minute questions, I'd like to kind of extend this out to our presenters today. Do you have any final words that you would like to leave our audience with?
I really would just like to thank everybody for joining us. I know taking an hour out of some of your days or hour and a half is a big deal. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you sitting here listening to us talk, and I hope you all got something from it. And I really would invite, if you guys have something that works for you and you want to share it, please send it.
I also wanted to thank everyone for participating today. The work that we've done here, we certainly stand on the shoulders of others, we're happy to share. This is nothing that is proprietary to us.
Oh, yeah.
We look forward to working with you all going forward. As I'm sure all of you are aware, as we are aware, the population in the United States with respect to our senior community is only growing larger and larger, and we know that the senior population is going to overtake children, I think, for the first time as of 2020 or 2021 or 2022. And so it makes our work all that more important, because obviously with the rise in population, unfortunately we see a commensurate rise in abuse, and we want to do what we can to stop it.
Yeah, I'll just say that, thank you once again for your time and listening to how our process works here in this county. We are trying to brace ourselves for the tsunami of demographics, and APS really needs these partnerships with our police, our state attorney, and other partners in the community in order to protect the vulnerable adults that unfortunately at times are at risk.
All right, thank you all so much. We are going to go ahead and move into our closing at this time. Again, the first thing I would like to do is thank all three of our presenters today, not only for taking the time out of your busy day to present, but also all of the research that you are continuously doing for our elderly community and the hard work that you're doing in this field. So thank you very much for everything that you've done for us today. We would also like to thank all of our participants for joining us today. Without your participation and attendance, these webinars just would simply not be possible. So thank you very much for your attendance and support. Before you leave today's webinar, we always ask that you participate in our short survey. It gives us some great feedback about our webinars that we always try to use to make sure that you are getting the best webinar experience possible, and also change the content in any way that we disseminate that information out to you, our audience. So if you would go ahead and click on that word "here" there in the middle of your screen, it'll open up a new window for you, and you'll be able to take our customer satisfaction survey. Also in the bottom left-hand corner, you will see a copy of today's slide deck. Simply click on the file name and then click the download files button directly below that, and then you'll be able to download today's slides directly from the room before you leave. That way you have them in hand before you leave today's webinar. Again, we are recording this. We will be converting it into our archival version over the next few days, and we will get those emails out to you to let you know that it is ready. Again, thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you to our audience, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your afternoon.